I've seen a few comments on another post with men mentioning their partners turning them down when it comes to being intimate. So I'm curious to know how often she says no and how it makes you feel. I've been with my boyfriend for almost a year and not once turned him down. And if I do have my monthly cycle, I usually go down on him. Story 1. I used to initiate more often but got shut down at least 80% of the time. Maybe even more. It made me feel terrible. Now I don't bother as often and not much has changed. Story 2. Dated ninth grade through graduation. Tied the knot the same year we graduated in 2008. Separated last October. During high school, she couldn't get enough of it. She was a year ahead of me, went to college an hour away. I'd skip school for a few days and drive up there. And the second I got in the door, our clothes came off and we wouldn't get dressed until I left. The day we got married was the first time she ever turned me down. For the following 15 years, it was a lack of sexual contact for up to 6 or 7 months at a time. It wreaked havoc on my self-esteem. This, combined with her comments about other men or certain actors about what she'd like to do to them when I was right here in the same room willing to try it all, seriously messed with my head. I've talked to several women since separating from her and getting my head out of her influence, received nothing but compliments and positive feedback, which has worked wonders in helping me come back out of the shell I was crammed into. But I still deal with tons of self-doubt in regards to not only being attractive to any woman out there but also being enough in the bedroom. A man with a high sex drive, I haven't met a man without one personally, is going to be seriously bothered on multiple levels by constant and consistent rejection with little to no excuse, especially if it's a sudden dramatic change like my experience was. Story 3. I just did some quick math. It's about 1 out of 20 times she will decline. Out of the times she's declined, I'd say 4 out of 5 times I at least get a hand job as a consolation prize. When she really doesn't want to do anything, she gives me a rain check, and the next day she knocks my socks off with some really enthusiastic sex. Story 4. For a very long period of time, it was close to 90% of the time. We schedule it now and are doing a lot better, but I don't think I will ever get over the psychological pain that it caused. When it got to the point that I stopped initiating, the entire relationship started to feel like constant rejection. I was just thinking about it constantly, and knowing it would be rejection if I did anything about it meant I was experiencing rejection multiple times every day without actually being rejected. Story 5. I've been married 15 years. I read the signs and can tell when initiating will be successful and when it will not. Therefore, I technically do not get turned down. Story 6. Can't remember it happening. But I'm also aware of how she is feeling the day she had and so on. I don't initiate anything if it doesn't seem like a good time. Just cuddles and kisses. It's the same from her to me. If you pay attention to your partner, you will quickly learn how they are and when they're not in the mood. Respect it. Story 7. Used to be 90%. I ask much less often now, probably down to 50 or 60%, if you count getting around to it a few days later as not being turned down. Married around 10 years. She has health issues, but honestly, it was trending that way before she started feeling this bad. She does enjoy it when we get around to it. Story 8. The cosmic joke here is that having two people's intimate desires coincide seamlessly is tough. I don't know that you should take that to mean you're undesirable or someone settled for you. You don't have access to the inner thoughts and feelings of other people. All you can do is talk to them and let them know how you feel, and ask them how they feel, and listen. Story 9. I've been in relationships where I've been turned down 99% of the time, even for just a hug, and it has felt awful. I've also been in relationships where I've never been turned down. What I do know is that in the relationship where I was nearly always turned down, there were deeper issues that were causing it, and I didn't deal with those issues quickly enough for them to be surmountable. Story 10. I was fit, she was healthy, in our 20s, got turned down about half the time, and when I finally asked about it, I got the "I wanted you to just go for it" speech. Initiated a lot less after that. Story 11. After 38 great years, she overnight started continuously rejecting me. 2 years of counseling later, I am divorcing her. My girlfriend is even hornier than I am, so I'm delighted to be back to being blessed with constant sex and no rejection. Story 12. She hardly turns me down anymore. I want to share what I wrote about it in the other sub because it has greatly helped us. I had a few lengthy discussions about this with my fiancé, before she was my fiancé. She shared with me quite openly why she did not initiate more, and that changed my entire perspective and our relationship. So maybe this can be of help if her reasoning applies to other women. She basically explained that she needs much more buildup of intimacy during the day. And by that, she didn't mean sexual innuendo, but moments of genuine connection. Sometime during dinner to actually talk and reflect on our day, chores done on both sides for the greater good, a hug and a kiss whenever possible, snuggling on the couch. She needs to feel this connection with me on all levels to even be able to get in the mood. I have to admit I was pretty busy back then and did not always prioritize this during the day. We would usually just run into each other in bed at night. I was eager to blow off some steam and she seemed lukewarm about it at best. She explained that in those moments she was absolutely not in the mood because she hadn't connected with me through the day, and now that I finally could give her some attention, the first thing I wanted was intimacy. I've been trying to improve on that every day, and it has definitely improved our relationship. She initiates about 1/3 of the time now, and she also hardly declines anymore. I find it rewarding too. It feels like I've gotten to know her much better since. That's why I ended up proposing. Story 13. I was with one woman where it was 90% most of the time, then became 100%. We would still have sex once a month, but never when I initiated. I would get rejected, and a week or so later she would want sex. Story 14. Female here. Never turned him down in 7 years. There have been plenty of times I haven't really felt like it, but I'm a firm believer that there are two people in a partnership, and I'm sure he said yes to me when he hasn't felt like it. There are plenty of times, however, when I've participated and flatly said from the beginning there's zero chance of me getting there. So don't even try because my head's just not in the game. We've had plenty of times where we had planned it and then stayed up too late or left our run too late, and one of us suggested we rain check and the other is like, oh thank God. Story 15. I couldn't really tell you the last time. Usually, the only time she wouldn't be down is if she's exhausted, ill, or trying to make a deadline, and I just don't try to start anything then because why would I? Story 16. With my natural libido levels, I'd say I'm declined 85% of the time. I've increased my leisure time, so now I only get declined 50% of the time. Try less, get declined less, unfortunately. Story 17. My lady turns me down sometimes. Sometimes, when she's not in the mood, she'll have a quick encounter with me. Most of the time, that turns her on enough and she wants to finish too. There are also times she needs intimacy and I'm not into it, but I still give in to her too. I don't know. We've been together happily for 25 years, and we have always been respectful of one another's sexual needs and desires. I suppose it's a healthy balance. I also like her to want me to woo her into sexual desire. A sensual back rub or a nice dinner and a bottle of good wine is a good way to get her in the mood. Story 18. I was engaged to a girl who was abused by her babysitter from age 8 until age 14. In the 6 years we were together, I think we had sex possibly 12 times. I told her after 6 years I couldn't live like this anymore, as I became massively addicted to pornography. I told her I love her, but if she can't have sex with me, I'd have to find it elsewhere. She was totally okay with it and was actually excited she wouldn't have to say no and have me go masturbate to pornography anymore. But then I started having sex with other girls and feelings ensued. I had to end it because I'm not suited for a polyamorous relationship. I didn't leave her for another girl. I left her because I need a sexual relationship, and I can't engage sexually with a bunch of people or random people. It's part of the relationship package. Tragic. Story 19. My ex used to turn me down a lot as I had a higher sex drive. The girl I'm with now has a higher sex drive than me, and she initiates nearly all the time, which is refreshing. However, I find myself being the one now who just wants to lay and cuddle after sex, and she wants to continue going. Story 20. There was this one girl. She had been in an awful situation right before we first started dating. We had sex the second and third time ever hanging out. We started dating, and she proceeded to turn me down every single time for the next 2 months. Story 21. Damn. I am so incredibly lucky. It's tough seeing so many people get rejected concerning sex. My girlfriend has a very sensitive vagina. I guess that's the best way to put it, although it's a bit of an understatement. I have some great sex. and she has over 5 orgasms in 15 minutes just from penetration. I'm good at sex, but most of that is definitely her sensitivity. It feels like our best sex every other time for her. Unsurprisingly, she's the most passionate person I know. She might refuse it, but she makes it obvious it's in the cards that night if any little thing turns her on. Story 22. I initiate probably 98% of the time. She rejects it 99% of the time. This is one of the reasons we are separating, but apparently all men think about is sex. She hasn't worried that I have paid off our mortgage, given her a good life, and made her want for nothing. Funny how that happens, and all I wanted was to be loved and shown compassion. Story 23. Bloody hell, it's disturbing and sad how many guys here settled for sexless relationships even though that's not what they want, just because they don't have self-respect and don't stand their ground. If a woman rejected me the majority of the time and there isn't some temporary problem like actual tiredness, illness, or something similar, or if she ever weaponizes sex, I am breaking up with her. Story 24. She never says no, and I do not either. We also have agreed we do not have to ask. We own each other in that sense. Also, the only thing a period stops in this house is a sentence. Story 25. I'm curious as to what men class as a try. Do you actually ask, start foreplay, or start passionate kissing, etc.? Autistic woman here, spell it out. Laugh out loud. Story 26. Frustrating how society paints this. If a man's needs aren't being met and he steps out, he's an asshole. But if a girl's needs aren't being met, then it's poor you, and he's an asshole. Story 27. She never turns me down. She just acts like I'm not doing anything, which is confusing to me. I need to learn that it means no, but I don't have the guts to say no, and I don't want to hurt your feelings because I love you. This happens about 50% of the time, but I only try about once a week. She tries about once a week too, and I turn her down about a third of the time. Usually, I'm not in the mood when she tries, but I want to make her happy, so I go along with it. Sometimes she makes me feel in the mood and sometimes not. Story 28. Let's see, 98% of every time I ask multiplied by a factor of always, divided by 0 and add days ending in Y. I think the answer is almost always. Maybe 2 to 3 times a year she'll say okay. But I'm doing all the work. Story 29. My girl has yet to turn me down since the day we started dating, and it has always been a mutual want. It has never been a favor for either of us. Granted, we don't do it every day or even every time we see each other. But when we do want to, we do. I love her so much. Story 30. Been married for 15 years. Sexual health and intimacy are important. As such, we almost never turn each other down, 1 out of maybe 50 requests. And if we do, it is normally, how about tomorrow? Or an offer of an alternative. I do not take it personally, and it does not make me feel bad when it happens because I know and trust there is always a reason, and I know that it has nothing to do with me or our relationship. Story 31. Once in a while, but I've also turned down due to not feeling good or being too tired after a 20-hour shift. But we generally have intimate moments 3 to 4 times a week after 8 years of marriage. Story 32. I am pretty much ready to rock her world at a moment's notice, and I make sure she knows it through compliments, flirting, and kisses. She loves the attention, and I understand that she's not always prepared for intimate moments like I am. I really don't consider it getting turned down. Story 33. I don't think I've turned my partner down at all in our 4 years. He's turned me down from being tired after work or a long day, or if we've been drinking and he's got whiskey dick, but that's about it. I have a higher sex drive than him. I prefer to have sex with him every day if I could, but we have sex usually weekly. I feel bad for some of you all in these comments. I love my fiancé so much and am so attracted to him. I couldn't imagine turning him down, let alone all the time. Story 34. Without sexual intimacy, I disconnect emotionally and become repulsed. I can't even stand to be around the person. With sexual intimacy, I'm quite normal. But without it, get ready for an autistic person who needs lots of solitude, has general anxiety being around people for too long, and a strong sense of fight or flight. Sexual intimacy recharges my social battery. My wife knew sex was very important for me going into it, but she needs sex about as much as I do. It's her love language and she feels unloved without it. Story 35. My lady has a much lower libido than mine and only turns me down when she's not feeling well. Otherwise, it's multiple times a day initiated by me, and she'll also initiate on her own accord. Our fluids are drained, and I would say I am blessed with an amazing woman. Story 36. When she was my girlfriend, she never turned me down and even initiated it. My wife of 30 years at least 7 times a week and 10 times on weekends. It makes me feel like I am nothing more than a roommate who pays all the bills. Story 37. I never used to turn my husband down, very rarely. Then, the oddest thing happened once we hit our 30s. He desired me a lot less. It was very odd. I figured out that the novelty does wear off after a while when you always get what you want. Turning down his advances here and there is healthy for our sex life, and it returned to normal. Story 38. My wife of 4 years is extremely loyal and likes making sure I have everything I need to be happy, but she is not a very sexual person. This is incredibly difficult for me as we are both young, barely in our mid-20s, and we only have sex about 1 to 3 times a month. Unfortunately, I would have to say that the amount of times I am turned down when I have asked directly is about 90 to 95% of the time. When I have hinted and not expressly said anything, that does not usually go anywhere either because, as I mentioned before, she is not very sexual and either does not pick up on the clues or does not feel inclined to initiate. Lately, there has been a downward shift towards the worst, because after 4 years, I am supposed to get it, I guess. My wife sometimes accompanies her no's with attitude and irritation, as if the act of asking itself is bad because I ought to already know the answer or something. So now I have that to deal with too. As for your question about how it makes me feel, I have to say that for a while it drove me nearly insane, and I say that only half-jokingly. I very often struggled with anger, depression, and even questioning self-worth immediately following or caused by some of these interactions. There were more than a few times that I had to just leave the house and go for a drive or something to clear my mind. And unfortunately, there were more than a few times that I considered what my life would have been without my marriage. There were more than a few times that I considered suicide. But given that she is a great wife on all other counts besides sex, I do not like to think about that. Nowadays, I still struggle with the sex stuff, and I think I always will. Unlike my wife, I have an extremely high sex drive, higher than any of my friends and family from the conversations I have had. But I guess I just felt like if it was a choice between feeling the lowest of lows 90 to 95% of the time or just living my life like a normal 20-something-year-old guy, I would pick the second one any day. So now I just keep physical touch as a non-sexual thing with my wife and do not ever really ask for sex at all. Sometimes she feels like it and we will have sex. The rest of the time we will not. And that is okay, because I make as many changes as I can to work around her. I guess that makes me pretty loyal too.